Hi, I'm Nelson Ford at the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona. We're going to do a little Q&A here. It's always a lot of fun and lively. Ricky, Smith 28-2 timing issue. Seems to lock bolt at last, very second. No real problems, hard to stage, lock up. And next it seems to fire at the same time. Like to have cylinder advanced a little ahead of trigger dropping. It's not a big problem. In fact, there was a guy, Michigan sergeant, state police, and his name was, he taught a system, it'll come to me, he taught a system where you stage the trigger back like you want to do, you pull back, and if you do it kind of a little quickly, the cylinder does get there a little better on some, but we can heat and bend the hand and get you there quicker. Sergeant Leppert of the Michigan State Police Department, he taught at their academy. And it's today known as the Leppert System. And if you look it up on Google, I think you'll find it, Sergeant Leppert. And it was taught at a United States Marksmanship Academy here in Phoenix for a long time. A guy named, I think, James Jarrett, a Vietnam vet, taught that. And they would bring guns to me and say, this one's not pre-timing. You need to get that cylinder a little bit faster so you could come up and pull to the rear, get that cylinder lock in place, and then pull slowly. And it's a little easier if you're not still turning the cylinder, and then get it to fire. It's called the Leppert system. Pull, fire, pull, fire. And we can do that for you here on a 28. I think we set the hammers at 38 ounces. We set the cylinders up so I try to get less than 10 thousandths behind the cartridge and in front of the recoil shield. It's nice to have 4 thousandths up front. You got to have the cylinder rotating freely. There's a bunch of things we do to make them right, but I always tell people to put a love letter in the box when they ship to me and tell me what they're thinking and what's on their mind. We do get Jane Does. We got a 1911 a year ago this summer. The gun was dropped in the box and there was no packing, and the hammer punched 3 holes in the box before it got to me, and there was no information in there. And they used a shipping service. So I call that a Jane Doe. We just lock it in under Jane Doe and wait for the person to call up all upset. I tell them, you didn't put any information in the box. But so if you send your 28 to me, make sure you write a little letter what's concerning you the most, and then name, address, and phone clearly, and you'll get a lot of good communications. I like to text. I'm not an emailer. There's a problem with emailers. A lot of them that are retired will send me 3 pages of questions, and I just look at it and I tell them I don't have time to go to a movie. So that's an issue we can deal with. Here's another guy that says there's a whole lot going on here, but his general question is he's talking about a romantic gun, an 1800s cowboy era, fires smokeless LC. I think he means just 45C. Long Colt is not really a term. 45 Colt is a term. Can I buy 2,000, 3,000 maybe by auction? Too low. Something with a lot of cartridge play in the frame. Don't know what cartridge play is.
You want something tight, like not loose, I think is what he's getting at. Non-worn out.
Yeah, but you can make them all tight. You just buy the bushing and drop it in there, a new bushing, a cylinder bushing, and you just face it and you get your cylinder where you want it, and you're okay. You can go out and buy a brand new Colt and get something really nice. I mean, for 25 or 2,800, they're making them just like they used to. I think they only make maybe 2 or 3 a day tops, and that went on, I think, in the 20s and the 30s. They weren't making a lot of guns. They're making maybe 1,000 a year for many of those years. The contracts in the 1800s, the government was buying lots of guns, and that was the only gun at the time. And not the only gun, but the only big gun, and Peacemaker certainly played its part in American history. And so they were, they sold a lot of them then, but even in the 20s and 30s, they almost died out. And they said they were antiquated and weren't going to make them after World War II. But when they saw, Gene Autry and John Wayne and of course Gunsmoke and all the different shows coming on, they had to start making them again. Great Western was pumping out guns, and so they wanted a piece of that market. But I think you're going to find that if you spend some time looking at them, and if you have to think about what you want, what you're going to do, are you going to shoot it? Do you want to buy a gun because of what the caliber is? Do you want to buy a Peacemaker because of where it was shipped? A lot of times if they have letters with them and they were shipped to the Copper Queen Consolidating Mining Company, south of Phoenix here, down there, a few hours down near the border, or something that was shipped to Texas. Texas is another great state to have a Peacemaker shipped to, especially in the late 1800s. Law enforcement got them, and people love Texas ship guns. There's a lot of them. They're shipped to New York, partly and such, and they don't garner as much provenance. It's just New York. But if you want to get a Peacemaker, you're going to find one. You kind of turn my stomach over here because they get me going. Peacemakers are cool. And when people say, "Oh, the grip is wrong," when you get in a '58 Corvette, you're getting into one of the coolest looking cars God ever made. And you don't say the seat doesn't fit and the knob's not in the right place for shifting, and I don't like the sides of this wheel. You're experiencing a '58 Corvette, and you become part of it. It doesn't become part of you. And the same thing goes with Peacemakers. You learn about that gun and you become part of it. And when you see guys like Bob Munden and Bob James and some of the other speed shooters with them, you can make those guns work. These guys will draw and fire in less than a quarter of a second. Most people can't even react to a light coming on that fast. And so the guns are magic. You have to become part of them, and you'll find what you're looking for. 2 to 3 thousand. That's going to be minimum. I would suggest trying to find something that was um, third or fourth generation, because it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be affordable. You're not going to be afraid to shoot it. And if you buy something from the 1800s, then you have to go out and find, you have to load your own black powder stuff. That's trouble. I've done it. And it's cool, though. Makes a lot of smell and a lot of smoke. I never use the substitute. I always use a black powder, and that cloud will just go down the range over all the tables with the wind, and they'll all be upset because they have to smell the rotten egg smell of the black powder. People are talking about Colts here a lot. They talk about, some guy says one was delivered without rifling. Some guy's talking about one from 9x23 Winchester. I don't think they've made those things in 35 years. And they're talking about somebody who hasn't touched or worked on a modern Colt in probably 30 years. I spent my whole life on them. I checked in a trophy today. They're so gorgeous. Had 25 Lions Prince checkering front and back. It very reasonably priced. Hammer forged barrel, all the best parts on the inside. Slide the frame fit, incredible. I don't know what there is to hate about them, or I think it's kind of like Chevy Mopar, Oldsmobile, whatever. My dad had an Oldsmobile '88 Speedster. My grandpa had a 340 Duster, and they get stuck on stuff. I've been stuck for 45 years, and if you haven't been there, I know some people, they work in a gun shop for a few years, or they do this for a few years. I shot 300 speed matches before I was 30 years old, and I'm 69 now. And I've worked in this shop since I was 23. That's before Ronald Reagan was elected president. And people have brought me thousands, 20,000 Colt and other type 1911s. And I've had to make them all work. And if they don't work, they come right back. Most gunsmiths are gone in 2 or 3 years from a location because they can't face the comebacks. I've had to. I've had to figure out and discern the differences. I had one the other day. I told a friend of mine, I'm going to forget what I did to figure this out because I've only run into this a few times. But I had a full 1305 disconnect in a Colt. And I think that somebody had changed the sear, and the ears and the bottom of the sear were longer. So when the slide was going back and pushing that disconnect down, it couldn't go down far enough to release the sear. And so if your finger was on the trigger when you dropped the slide, the hammer came down. If you were shooting it, pop up, you got it doubled. And I had to cut the underside of the sear so we could reset. And I don't know that I've done that more than 3 or 4 times in almost 20,000 1911s. We checked in, like I think I just said, we checked in a trophy today. The older, there was another question, older, newer Colts. The older Colts, the old gold cups, you go like this and hear them rattle. And that's just not a euphemism. I'm just not making this up. They make noise. And they had, Gene Christoffel and I joined Cactus Combat League on the same day. They have thousands of members now, but we were 351 and 352. And he had the old Alliance sight with the 16th inch pin in it, and they'd snap. And I made a harder pin. I'd put it in there, and they'd slide out. So I made a harder pin a little bit longer, and I'd turn the ends on the end so that it would stay in there, and then it would break. And those sights, Wilson used to make a little plastic disc that you put under there so it would keep it from slapping, because the slide came all the way to the rear, the slide would slap. And then the front sight had, they weren't dovetailed with a beautiful Novak cut. They were a 16th inch 058 tentacle. And almost all the time on the Gold Cup, since it had the flattened serrate, but it wasn't a flattened serrate, it was a raised rib on there. And so there was more distance, and you wouldn't get such a crimp on the bottom of the tentacle when they put it in. And almost every Gold Cup that came in, I'd put my finger on it, and I'd just wiggle my finger on it, and it would be loose. I'd tell them, you need a dovetail. No, I don't spend the money. The new trophies have a Novak cut on the front, and they have a Bowmer on the back with a pony embossed in the not a Novak in the back, a Bowmer in the back with a pony embossed on it, and they have beautiful checkering front and rear. Their slide to frame fits are great. The parts are good. If you don't like them, that's okay. I don't know anybody that's looked at as many guns as I have, and my dad used to hate me saying stuff like this. But at 45 years in the business, only way I have had to make money is to go down and work on guns. No salary. I'm not a UPS driver during the day. No days off. No nothing. I go and fix guns for 45 years, every day of my life. I did it today. I have to do about at least 500 in labor a day just to keep my store open. And that's a lot of work. And you're talking about a guy that has trigger jobs, feed jobs, trigger jobs, feed jobs, and then he goes home and sleeps. And he gets up and he does it again. And I've been doing this for 45 years. I've got to have some credibility in the community about the guns. Some guy said he got a gun with no rifling in it. I believe you. But I've never seen that. And I've checked in over 40,000 guns. I've never seen a barrel without rifling in it. I've seen belt feds where they've taken the rifling out of the guns with 20, 30, 40, 50,000 rounds. But I've never seen a barrel deliver without rifling. And in fact, I've even told people, even on cheap guns, H&R double action revolvers, even if the guns are $100, which they used to be in Smitty's store back in the 70s here in Arizona, they still shot well. Everything had rifling in it. You rest yourself on a table and you shoot almost everything shoots well. I've never seen a barrel without rifling in it. So I don't mean to ever be contraire. I'm just talking about where I come from, and I'm I'm a little over 5.5 feet tall, and I'm an old man. I lived a rough life, but I'm not intimidated on this stuff anymore. I think I've spent more time inside these guns, Smith revolvers and 1911s, than anybody I've ever met. And I'm not standing on a high horse. I'm just saying those are the best. Colts are the best. And I'm going to have in the future. I've got a couple of really great guys. We're gonna put 2 chairs here. And we're gonna do interviews, and I'm gonna get Chuck Rogers down here, and I'm gonna let him talk about 1911s. And there's not a man on the planet that's any better on 1911s than he is. He is out there, and I'll let him talk to you about 1911s. So I guess I got a little carried away on it, but thanks for listening. And I got a dinner date to get to. Have a nice night.